morning. Welcome to the Sunday morning worship service at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Bridget Coleman, and I am a member of the Board of Trustees. I'm giving all of you extra credit for being at the early service on a morning like this. I'm not sure if I was driving through snow or freezing rain or hail, but good job. Unitarian Universalism is a faith tradition committed to creating a just and flourishing world for all people. Our Universalist theology tells us that every person is worthy of love. Thus, when we say, whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here, this is our message of love to you, inviting your whole self into this space to help us co-create a world centered on our values. We invite you to learn more about us and consider joining this community to enact our values of equity, justice, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. Now, if you are online, I invite you to greet each other through the chat, and if you are present here, I invite you to turn to someone you did not come with and greet them with a wave and a good morning greeting.
I light this chalice for you shared value of generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. Thus we covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another and relationships of interdependence and mutuality.
Good morning. Welcome to this place of love, this place of communal flourishing. We gather to open our hearts, to expand our minds, and to see the sacred within each other. Come, let us worship together.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing hymn number 1010. Oh, yeah, we're going to do number 1010. We give thanks.
Give them a second. Justin's probably moving aside.
Please join me in reading our DUUC mission statement. We gather as an inclusive community to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world toward fairness, love, and compassion. Each spring, our congregation embarks on its annual Promise campaign. Our Promise campaign is the time when each member or pledging friend of the congregation shares a financial commitment to our church. The financial commitment helps us to craft a proposed budget for the coming fiscal, which begins in July. As a church, we are supported almost completely by the members and friends of our congregation. We receive no outside grants, and unlike other denominations, we receive administrative and programmatic support from our denomination, not financial. You are what makes it possible for us to offer vibrant Sunday morning worship, robust religious education for all ages, engaging community gatherings, and even keep our lights on, our prairie tended, and the heat flowing. After feedback from you during our congregational conversations, our goal is to include in the coming year's budget a director of music and worship arts. This is a new staff position that will significantly enhance not just our worship services, but potentially offer more worship opportunities and engage more of our congregation from our youngest to our oldest in meaningful musical programming. Check out the table in Creeves Hall after the service to learn more about the position. During each Promise campaign, we ask our members and friends to consider all the gifts this church gives you. The relationships and connections, the educational opportunities, the music and worship experiences, and care for each other and opportunities to do justice in the world. As you consider your pledge for the coming year, please consider these gifts. We also know that sometimes life circumstances mean that finances are tight. Please know that you can always reach out to Reverend Mandy to request a waiver for the coming year. We hope to end our pledge drive this month. Please log into Realm or email our office administrator, Sherry Regalado, to make your pledge. There will also be volunteers in Creeves Hall after the service to help you make your pledge or answer your questions. As always, thank you. Your generosity in all its forms allows us to be a community of love for all the world.
Good morning. I first visited a Unitarian Universalist church when I lived in Las Vegas in 2009 for a spring equinox celebration with a local Covenant of UU Pagans chapter, known as CUPS for short. My first visit to DUUC was for a seasonal ritual in 2018 when the Earth-centered group was called Duckies, and I became a member of this church in October of 2023. Since then, I've had the pleasure of hearing many of your stories about what brought you here, and some of you probably heard mine as well, of how I grew up in an Eastern spiritual tradition rooted in meditation, then found my way to earth-based spiritual traditions as a teenager, which led me to seeking out CUPS chapters as I moved around the country, eventually landing in Naperville. That is the short and sweet of it, but there is more to my story which I would like to briefly share with you now. Up until a few years ago, I was a quiet, reserved, and often angry young person. Due in large part to generational trauma, the household I grew up in was often chaotic, unpredictable, and generally not healthy in an emotional and psychological sense. The net result of this for me was that I carried a deep sense of otherness and isolation, which very much felt like truth to me. And those feelings of isolation and otherness were only made more intense by my being a young person coming to terms with my identity as a queer person and dealing with questions and confusion around my cultural and racial identity. Generally, the world did not feel safe for me for a long time. Not at home, not at school, and not in general society, where my rights to fully participate in American life, and at times even my personhood, felt called into question and up for debate. At some point, I stopped questioning why I didn't seem to belong or fit in. I just accepted it, that depression and otherness were a fact of my life. In the spiritual tradition I grew up in, I was taught that meditation was the answer to healing and peace, and it did help me a lot. But as I came to learn about earth-centered traditions, I soon came to hold dear what I now recognize as one of our UU values, interdependence. Honoring the web of all existence and acknowledging our place in it. By starting to acknowledge my place in sacred, interconnected existence, an ember of hope began to flicker inside of me that I might be able to find healing and peace as well as belonging. Initially, this was a sense of interdependence with the natural world in finding spiritual connections with the changing seasons, for example. But as I sought out deeper learning and understanding on my earth-centered path, I found myself seeking out CUPS events more and more. And at those events, I saw folks radiating a spirit of joy and care and sharing deeply in sacred space their innermost hopes and fears. In college, I started to consider for the first time the importance of loving community with other people and the possibility that I might be able to participate. This did not come naturally or quickly for me, but that ember had been given some oxygen, and I began persistently to follow its light. I stoked the light of that little flame by seeking community in various places as a young adult, but as a spiritual seeker, the Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans was the one space that I learned was consistently and reliably there for me when I sought out community and celebration. I naturally learned more about the values of Unitarian Universalism as a whole and began to see why it made sense that earth-centered groups have a home here. And eventually, I found that I have a home here too, for all of who I am. Today, I can say that I know and believe strongly in community. And I know that we need spaces like this church to hold each other in the power of love and interconnectedness as we live through the joys and hardships of life together. People are meant to be in community. Since discovering the importance of our interdependent web, I have felt called to participate in ensuring its endurance and persistence by giving generously where I am able, and at other times seeking to humbly receive in gratitude. And I cannot say how very grateful I am for this beloved community. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Our vision of beloved community is rooted in the relationships that we have with one another, our world, and creation. Each week, we share our joys and concerns. I had one come through email, sorry. Our flowers today are from Alexis Trocki. Happy birthday to one of the best men I know, my dad, John Lewis. May he have many happy birthdays before him. From Keith and Mary Beth DeBolt, Mary Beth's father passed away on his birthday, Tuesday, March 11th, early in the morning. He did actually live to be 95. It appeared to be a personal goal, as he had not been responsive for many days. He got to say goodbye to each of his five children last week, and he will be missed. May you both and your whole family be surrounded with love, and may his memories be a blessing to you all. Let us take a deep breath in. I am reminding myself, as you may as well, that we have to keep breathing in this moment. The state of our nation is not one that is easy to consider, but we are here, we are breathing, and we are together in a warm space filled with the love and joy of each of us. A space that is brave for our queer folks, a space that is kind and loving. It is for all of us to belong here. Please join me in a moment of silent meditation.
it is time to gather, and I'd like to invite the young people, the young at heart, to come forward and join me for a story. Come on over. How are you guys doing? Be sure to sit over so you can see the wall over there. So did you guys have a windy night Friday night? You didn't hear anything? Oh. Well, the sirens woke me up. Oh, well, in some of the towns, they had tornado warnings, and my town had a tornado warning. And it was the closest it ever felt like a tornado for me, because it got really loud. It was like a train coming through. So did any of you have places in your house where when the wind blows, you can hear it whispering to you? Yeah. What do you think those whispers are saying? Don't know. Well, I have a story about the whispering wind. And the story is The Whisper in the Winter Woods. So once upon a time, in an Algonquin village where snowy winters lasted many long weeks, lived a kind-hearted child named Willow. Willow had a special gift for making people smile, whether by helping someone carry heavy firewood or by baking warm corn cakes to share with friends. One year, the snow was heavier than ever before, and the nights seemed darker too. And during these chilly months, families stayed inside around their fireplaces, telling stories. Some tales were happy, some were sad, but the one that fascinated Willow the most was the legend of the Wendigo. Grandfather Eagle Eye was the village storyteller, and one crisp evening, he gathered the children in his cozy home to share the tale. In the forest, he began, lives a spirit known as the Wendigo. If a person's heart grows too hungry and they never share what they have, if selfishness takes hold, this spirit stirs in the darkest part of the wood. It calls in a lonely howl that echoes on the wind. The Wendigo is a warning to our people. Do not let greed grow in your heart, or the Wendigo's whisper may find you. So Willow and the other children shivered at the story. But what happens if what happens if the Wendigo comes? Willow asked. And Grandfather Eagle Eye smiled gently. Share what you have, be kind, and keep your heart open. And this is how we keep the Wendigo away. Well, a few days later, the village fell on hard times. The snowstorm had been so fierce that the hunters returned empty-handed from the forest, and the fishermen could not break through the thick ice. Food became scarce. Families worried about running out of their winter stores. And Willow noticed that her neighbor, Mr. Flint, started locking away extra food. He didn't share with anyone, not even with the birds that came pecking for seeds. Each day, he only muttered, I must keep everything for myself, while his pile of supplies grew bigger and bigger. One night, Willow heard a distant, haunting sound carried on the wind. It was like a moan, like low and hollow, rustling through the tall trees. And the next morning, Mr. Flint came running through the village with wide, frightened eyes. I heard something last night, a long, sad howl. It felt like icy fingers tapping on my window. Could it be the Wendigo? Well, the villagers remembered Grandfather Eagle Eye's tale, and some felt a chill at the idea, but others said, it's just the wind in the trees, as they're trying to stay brave. Willow, however, felt a tug in her heart. She worried that Mr. Flint's greed might indeed be awakening the Wendigo's warning, and she decided to set out in the snowy woods to see if there was truth behind the legend. Bundling up in her warmest coat, Willow carried a small basket of food, some corn cakes and dried berries, and she walked carefully through the snow, following the trail that led to the deepest part of the forest. And the wind swirled around her, whispering soft, eerie sounds. Eventually, Willow found a clearing where the pine trees stood in a circle, their branches drooping under heavy snow, and in the center of the clearing, the wind seemed to swirl in a slow dance. She felt both curious and scared. Suddenly, she sensed a presence, something longing and sorrowful. And though she saw no creature, she felt the loneliness in the air, as if the spirit of the Wendigo was all around her, waiting. Remembering Grandfather Eagle Eye's words, Willow stood as tall as she could and spoke aloud, though her voice trembled. Great Spirit of the forest, I bring an offering of kindness, not greed. I share what little I have. May it remind us all to help one another in difficult times. And she set down her basket on a tree stump and then stepped back. At first, nothing happened. Then the wind around her grew calmer, as though the forest itself was sighing with relief. And the eerie silence disappeared, replaced by the soft sound of snow falling gently around her. Willow smiled, feeling that maybe, just maybe, her act of generosity had calmed the Wendigo's lonely call. And she turned and walked home, her heart lighter, even though she had given away her extra food. Somehow, that felt right. When Willow returned to the village, she found Mr. Flint sitting sadly outside his locked storehouse, and she told him of her journey into the forest and what she had done. What if giving away the little I have means I go hungry? He asked in a meaningful whisper. Willow knelt beside him. If we all share, none of us has to go hungry. The storm is hard on everyone, and that's exactly why we need one another. Moved by Willow's courage, Mr. Flint slowly opened the door to a storehouse, and he gathered bags of grains, dried fruits, and other supplies to distribute among the villagers. Soon, neighbors brought their own bits of food and kind offerings to create a community feast. That evening, families gathered around a large fire at the center of the village. Bowls of warm stew were passed around, and everyone ate until they were full. Laughter replaced worry, and hope replaced fear. Grandfather Eagle Eye watched this all with a smile. Remember, he said, true goodness keeps away the Wendigo's lonely howls. When we share, we remind ourselves and any watching spirits that we are all one family. And from that night on, whenever the wind blew through the pines, the villagers felt less afraid. They knew that generosity and caring for one another could calm even the coldest winter nights. So the moral of the story is that the Wendigo reminds us of the dangers of selfishness and the power of generosity. When we share what we have, no matter how little, it brings warmth and unity to everyone and keeps the shadows of greed at bay. Let's sing to the children.
Picasso offers that the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. Giving of our treasure is how we reciprocate the many gifts we are given by this community. Even in an uncertain world, we have so much to be grateful for: life itself, our planet, love, and each other. Giving is also how we live our values. Each month, we share our offerings with an organization that gives life to these values and makes a difference in the world. The March special offering is for Riverwalk Adult Day Services. Founded in 1983 by a group of 15 religious institutions, including our church, who recognize the desire and benefits for adults to age in place at home, but who could not be left at home alone. Riverwalk Adult Day Services has provided over 700,000 hours of services by providing a safe, social, stimulating environment for adults in need of daytime care. As we pass our offering plate, know that it is a vessel that connects us to each other through our gratitude and generosity. So, give freely your thankfulness and abundance, that our values can forever take hold in our world. Today's worship service is the 6th in our series on our new Unitarian Universalist principles, which were voted on by delegates to General Assembly in June 2024. Centered around the word love, the 6 new value words each have a statement of what they mean, which is aspirational and focused, and are followed by a promise. A covenant of action. Rooting ourselves in a theological framework for each of our new values is especially important as we learn to embody and enact them in our world. In September, we explored our value of interdependence within the theological framework of Ubuntu. I am because we are. In October, we explored the value of transformation in the framework of process theology and Taoism. In November, we explored the value of pluralism through the lens of comparative theology. In January, we explored the value of equity through the lens of liberation theology. In February, we explored the value of justice through the lens of multiple Judeo-Christian theologies. Today, we will be exploring our value of generosity through indigenous practices, myths, and theology. The value of generosity might seem odd in comparison to some of the more lofty values of justice or transformation, but generosity is a value that roots all the others. Generosity of spirit, generosity of resources, generosity of love is how we create a world that brings forth the flourishing, beloved community for all people. Between the two worship services, all of the learning opportunities, children, youth, and adult, will offer space to dig more deeply into our new values together. Please join Steve Cooper as he leads the adult learning opportunity on generosity as it relates to justice.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing hymn number 317, We Are Not Our Own.
When my father remarried after my mother's passing, I gained a third side of the family through my stepmother. And my step-grandparents were amazing people. They were simple, hardworking, humble. They lived frugally. Most of their meat came from my stepfather's hunts or from the farm of a local farmer friend. They grew and preserved most of their own food. And they would go to the Keebler plant outlet for the discounted second-hand baked goods. And even then, they would buy 2 or 3 day-old bread to save a few more cents. I'm not joking. That was what they did. While my step-grandparents were likely in the more extreme end of frugality, the bloodline of my Dutch ancestors held this mentality too. My father has an app on his phone that will tell him when a local grocery store deeply discounts a product. My children are laughing. So it tells him when a local grocery store deeply discounts a product because it's about to expire, so he can then race to the store to purchase that product. I appreciate this mentality. And I especially appreciate the Depression era in which it came from. And in fact, my step-grandparents' frugality led them to eventually give to each of their 21 grandchildren $15,000 in inheritance during the 2008 recession. It was a generous gift. There's nothing wrong with an attitude of being frugal. And in fact, it's often born of necessity. And sometimes, as has become the case in my family, it's also led to a mentality of scarcity. When my step-grandparents had that money in the bank, they could have also had fresh bread. My parents spend more on gas to get to that grocery store than on saving on a soon-to-be expired grocery item. Scarcity can become a monster, even when it's well-intentioned. And it's not really a wonder that this is the case. The website of the American Economic Association defines economics as the study of scarcity, the study of how people use resources and respond to incentives. Scarcity is a mentality that, even in necessity, can very simply become consuming. Even when we have enough, the world is telling us that we could save more, or that we need to spend more so that we can keep up with others. We have a scarcity of material things. Or it's telling us we need to hoard what we have. Look no further than the toilet paper shortage of the 2020 pandemic. And the thing is, a mentality, the way we think, is how we act in the world. The Ojibwe Indigenous author Robin Wall Kimmerer calls our economic system and the resulting attitude of scarcity a Wendigo mentality. And I think that it is an apt metaphor. We told the story of the Wendigo here for our children, but that story, that was a very kid-friendly story, because the Wendigo is a true monster. It's a mythological creature or evil spirit originating from Algonquin folklore. Basil Johnson, an Ojibwe scholar, describes the creature this way, and I warn you, this is gruesome. The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation. Its desiccated skin pulled tightly over strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. Slightly different than the version we gave the children. Legend depicts the Wendigo as a creature of the winter cold and famine. It was cannibalistic. And it is said that whenever a Wendigo ate another person, it would grow in proportion to the meal it just had eaten, so it could never be full. Therefore, Wendigos are portrayed as simultaneously gluttonous and extremely thin due to starvation. The Wendigo is seen as the embodiment of gluttony, greed, and access. Never satisfied after killing and consuming, they are constantly searching for new victims. This imagery is especially poignant for me right now as tax breaks for the extremely wealthy are given by those in power who also happen to be extremely wealthy. Scarcity tells us we never have enough, can never be enough. It tells us to hoard what we have. It's an attitude of individuality, and it pervades even the most well-meaning of institutions and people. And I want to be clear here, it is not simply about money. Scarcity tells us that no one will help us when we're in trouble because no one cares. Scarcity feeds fear and anger into the DEI argument, saying that others are getting special entitlements when it is really just about creating equity. Scarcity tells a congregation that it cannot eliminate $1 million deficit. We did that, didn't we? Scarcity tells us to look out only for ourselves and to make everything a competition. The theology of the Wendigo is important if we're going to understand what generosity really means. It was not chosen as one of our new UU values because we need a sixth or because it sounded good, but because the all-consuming consciousness of the Wendigo has made its presence known in the world and in our congregations. Scarcity keeps us starving with a need that cannot be fulfilled by consuming more meaningless scraps of purchasing the latest product or hoarding toilet paper or telling us that we cannot accomplish something important. If we're going to truly counter this mentality, we need a powerful theology to contradict the Wendigo. In the same way we get the theological knowledge of the Wendigo, we can also look to Indigenous knowledge to provide us with a theological framework to set us on a healthier path. And an Indigenous economic perspective is one of a gift economy. It ensures that everything is seen as life-giving, not simply a commodity, a thing to be sold or purchased. It honors the interconnectedness of life and the general needs that we all have. Moreover, it counters the Wendigo myth by redefining abundance not as an overflowing basket, but as abundance that is enough for everyone. Because there truly is enough for everyone. Abundance tells us that, and that we must give away what we have when we have extra, whatever that might be, because it honors the undeserved gift. What do I mean by undeserved gift? Well, I love to garden, but I am under no illusion that I deserve, despite all of my hard work, any of the fruits of my labor. I'm not entitled to them any more than anyone else is. The plants I care for do what they're made to do, and in their doing, they share with me their fruits. I need those fruits to live, but I am no more deserving of those fruits than any other person, despite my labor of love. This is a gift economy, a system of moral and social agreements for indirect reciprocity rather than direct exchange. A gift economy sees the whole picture, each part and each person, and wishes to ensure the flourishing of all. It turns us from the individuality of the scarcity model towards the communal. It acknowledges the webs of relationships and the responsibilities we have toward not just all humans, but towards the more than human relationships we have as well. Several weeks ago, I spoke about the poverty of the soul as something that happens to those of us who have power and privilege. There's a poverty of the soul with those of us who have an overabundance of resources when we are unwilling to share them so that everyone can have enough. This is what the gift economy counters. It keeps the gifts moving so they do not stagnate and fester, especially in the light of true scarcity. At its core, a gift economy is about supporting all life. The thing about a scarcity mentality is that it's really hard to get rid of, and it starts to pervade every thought and action. For most of our children's lives, we lived in a very wealthy town thanks to faculty and staff housing through my partner's position at a local university. Every day at school pickup time, I would stand with the other parents after school waiting for my children to be dispersed. On one of those afternoons, as I was talking to another mother, I realized that I had inserted at least 5 comments about money throughout our short conversation. At some point, she moved on and we each collected our children, but I paid attention to other conversations I was having and realized that I often had thoughts about money and made a point to share that we didn't have much. This came as a heads up for me when I went for my career assessment through the UUA's ministerial formation process. Career assessment is an innocuous name for a psychological evaluation. Several weeks later, when I received the report, the evaluator wrote, and I quote, "Candidate and partner would benefit from financial counseling." Now, I appreciated this perspective, but we didn't need financial counseling. We were not irresponsible with our money. We just needed money. After I let go of my anger, though, I realized that he wouldn't have written that in the assessment if I hadn't been talking about money. I had become a bit obsessed with what we didn't have. Rightly so, as we had never been able to save for our kids' college education or a down payment for our house. We were very low income. Savings were not a financial picture because our income was only enough to live off, and that only frugally so. But scarcity had become so central to our identity that I was unable to recognize the gifts and the abundance before me. I committed that day to begin to see the gifts before me rather than what I didn't have. And it took a long time. In fact, I still struggle with this. But one of the things that helped was prioritizing generosity through gifts. One of the ways we saved a lot of money during that time period of our lives was through my gardening. And midsummer, with the zucchini plants growing enough to come out of my ears, I realized that not only did I have too many, but even if I made enough zucchini bread for the entire winter to freeze, I would never eat it all. Not to mention that I simply didn't have time to work, to garden, and to make all that bread and still spend time with my children. And so I let them go. I gave zucchini away. And the gifts that I got in return were more than I could ever imagine. Precious time with my children, joy on a neighbor's face, rest from the garden, and no anxiety about fitting in more than was possible in my time schedule. Generosity has its own rewards because giving means getting. The cycle of gifts means that not only does everyone have enough, but our souls are fed by the love and joy that generosity fosters. The theology of that Indigenous peoples gives us is wisdom to counter the scarcity and to affirm abundance. It leads us to understand that we cannot live in a system where someone's glut means someone else's death. This is particularly poignant with an unstable stock market and increasing tariffs. What is before us is a crossroads that will determine the survival of our species and the planet. We can choose to think with scarcity, or we can find our way into abundance. And so I leave you with the last lesson that I have learned about generosity and abundance. When we share our gifts, we have abundance. And in that abundance, we all have enough. In the face of our gifts, the Wendigo doesn't stand a chance.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing hymn number 128, For All That Is Our Life. All that is our life, we sing.
I missed a joy earlier. Amelia Deering is thrilled to share that she has accepted a new position as Development Project Manager at the Morton Arboretum. Her first day will be March 31st. She's so excited to be a champion of trees. And we are excited for you. Yay! In our benediction today, I invite you to recite our new UU value of generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. Because we value generosity, we vow to act. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality.
Please join me in our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish the light of this chalice, but not the light in our hearts. Until we meet again, may the warmth of our community carry you.